although they don't need introductions, I am going to give them an introduction anyway. Probably the next best thing after propaganda to come out of Canada is Jim Zub, and maybe Jim Carey, and of course, probably the best thing to come out of Spain is Jesus Merino. Ooh. Both of whom, as you know, while you're here, are here to discuss all things Conan. And I thought an easy one, with plenty of time to give over to questions at the end, is what makes a man in a furry loincloth so enduring after so many years?
It's a good question. Do you want to...
It's the only good question I've got.
Okay, well, it is a foundational one, so we can certainly go with that. What do you think, when you read Conan, you read it growing up?
Yeah, I've been reading Conan all my life since I was a child. I think it's a character that is... there are some... I won't say standard characters, but characters that are calling to the basic human being, you know,
right.
Tarzan. That we could do a crossover.
Oh yeah, just do the pulp everything.
Yeah,
just drive it right in there.
Conan, the Shadow.
Yeah.
I think this kind of characters that are very, very basic, you know, but not exactly basic. It's not the word.
No, I think exactly sort of what you're saying. When you're talking about iconic characters, first of all, I mean, Conan's like the foundation of the sword and sorcery genre.
Yes.
He's older than Superman, which a lot of people don't realize. He started in the pulps in the 30s. And the character is both simple to explain, but there are layers if you want to drill down deeper into them. And I think that's what makes the character great. If you want to come in at a surface level, it's very easy to understand. Well, you say kind of furry, you know. Yeah. In the original Howard stories in the Weird Tales, he looked more like a Grecian warrior. He would always be wearing like a corselet or, you know, like a chain shirt or whatever. And he had usually shorter hairs. He looked more like an Argonaut or whatever. But the vision of Conan, once you hit the Frazetta, you know, the 1960s, those paintings, they unleash the barbarism side of the character, that barbarian part. And the core concept of the character that Howard builds over his stories is this sense of civilization versus savagery. And the mistake that people make is they think, well, civilized good, savage bad. And what Conan in those stories you see over and over and over again is like the civilized man, whether it's, you know, the organized government or organized religion or things like that, they tell you one thing, but they're duplicitous. They're always manipulating or trying to control or trying to take things away from you or saying one thing and then stabbing you in the back. And Conan is harsh and vicious and violent, and he can be downright cruel, but he would never lie to you. If he says, you cross this line, you die, he'll kill you. But he tells you right up front, that's the way it's going to be. And so if you know what you're going to get with him, and if he says he'll fight by your side, he'll fight to his dying breath, who's truly savage and who's truly civilized? That's kind of, once you've got the surface level, Conan's cool, Conan kicks ass, Conan's violent, Conan is sort of this like, you know, aspirational or survivalist kind of character who fights against this savage world that wants to take everything and everyone apart and sort of strip down your humanity, and he's able to endure. There's that sort of, oh man, I wish I was the kind of person that the world could change upon my will or on the strength of my blade or whatever may have you. That's all very classic kind of empowered character stuff. But the more you read and the more you dig into it, there's more there. And then the original Robert E. Howard stories are also shockingly beautifully written, which I think throws people off. They think of the character and they think of the brutality, or they think of the visuals of because of the beautiful artwork and because of the comic stories or things like that, John Buscema or Barry Windsor Smith or Frank Frazetta or any of these characters, artists who put their stamp on it. But the original Howard text, there's a reason why Clark Ashton Smith and H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard are the three sort of pillars of Weird Tales. There were dozens and dozens of authors who did stuff in the magazine, but most of the stuff was very journeyman, forgettable, quick, disposable entertainment. And those three guys summoned something darker, something deeper, something more intrinsic. And in the case of Howard in particular, I think he finds a lyricism and a beauty in language that I think surprises me even now. I'll reread those stories, and in most of them you can read, they're short stories. You can read them in one sitting, and by the time you're done, it has summoned this phenomenal vision of action and power and savagery and intensity and emotion. And it's like more than the sum of its parts. You can look at it at a surface level and go, that guy kicks ass. That guy's the lone warrior and he goes places and exciting things happen. And that's a really easy sales pitch. But the more you read and the more you dig in, whether it's the lyricism or the psychology or the symbolism, it keeps meeting you wherever you want to meet it. And that's why I think it endures.
I think for me, another reason why it endures, bringing Jesus back into the conversation, is that Conan in the comics, whether it's Marvel, Dark Horse, Marvel, Titans again, has just had amazing artists, whether at the beginning of their careers. And I was talking to Jesus earlier how, you know, Robert Torres's artwork feels like John Buscema if he had all the time in the world to do what he obviously rushed back in the 70s.
Yeah, Big John sort of slamming into this almost like a Toth or a little bit of Kubert. Like you can see
the Kubert,
Roberto's influences, but he also is his own artist in terms of the way he lays out a page. He really opens up with a more expansive kind of vision. Sometimes the stuff looks downright like Prince Valiant, Hal Foster, like you can see those other things, the European influences kind of drawing into it. So he's clearly deeply influenced by John Buscema, but also a lot of other, you know, pieces as well.
And Victor de la Fuente.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The other day I was looking into the books of Victor de la Fuente, hand art and everything. I say, wow, this is Roberto.
Right? And that's the thing, like what amazes me about
this is the staff announcement. Could Thea please come to reception as Thea to reception?
No one's moving. No one's moving yet.
Did they say fear?
Thea, I think.
Oh, Thea. I was like, that would be kind of fear. Come to the reception. You're like, ooh, all right, it's dramatic. And so getting to work with, because the character's an icon and because so many artists grew up on this stuff, the love that they have, I think, comes through. Like, you want to give your best. And then you look at series like the flagship series, whether it's Barry Smith, eventually Barry Windsor Smith, or Big John or whoever else.
Carrie Nord was a great one.
Carrie Nord, You are now standing on the shoulders of frost giants.
I like that.
You've got to bring your best. If you don't, you're letting Conan down, you're letting the fans down. Like, you know that book always summons something beautiful on the page. And you're used to seeing that. So if you get your shot, you better make it the best damn way you can.
Because that was something I was going to say, because looking at those pages you've got with you today, and if you've not seen Jesus's pages from the new comic book, it's really worth seeing them before they sell out. There does seem to be something in the artist that does want to bring, turn up to 11.
I think, but you know, Savage Sword of Conan was also this black and white showcase. Some artists really cut their teeth on that series. I think Mike Mignola, it's one of his first professional pieces. He does a pinup in there. Guys like Jeff Easley, who will go on to define the look of Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s. He's like a kid right out of art school. He does a couple pinups in there. Like, and then these other artists finally, and there's nothing wrong with color. Color's amazing, but you're not able to let the color fill in the gaps. You've got to do it in black and white. You've got to prove your bona fides as a storyteller. You've got to make that texture and that atmosphere without the colorist. And so you got to put it all there. It's all got to be there on the page. And I think that again, trained people like Conan is where you get to be unleashed as an artist. And so before I did Conan, I had not written, maybe once or twice I'd written what we call plot style, or sometimes they call it Marvel style. So typically when you're writing a comic script, you would write what we call full script. So you would do page 1, panel 1, here's what happens in the panel, here's all the dialogue, or what we call the text call-outs, sound effects or whatever. Here's panel 2, panel 3, panel 4. Some artists will combine panels, or they'll break actions into multiple panels. They don't have to necessarily follow it absolutely strictly as written, but most do. Whereas in the 60s and 70s, when Stan and Jack, or when Roy Thomas and Barry, or those guys are drawing the books, they were doing a plot style, what they eventually call Marvel style. So they will write, on this page, these things happen. How many panels does it take? That's up to you. You do the storytelling. You lay out a page that's going to play to your strengths. as long as those key storytelling things are met, in the roughs we can always adjust or tweak or whatever. And then the dialogue gets done, the text gets done after the visuals are done. And so the artist comes first in the hierarchy. They get to really set the pace. They get to decide if it's big and expansive or blow it out. And when I started, when I'd written Conan at Marvel, I was doing it full script because that's what they expect from you. And then, when we were going to relaunch at Titan, Roberto literally told me, he's like, don't tell me how to tell a story. Like, Rob's a fully formed artist. And he said one of the things that drove him crazy about working with North American writers was that they were always very demanding. Okay, this is a mid-shot. It should be about a quarter of the page, and it should be like this, and it should be like that. And for some artists, that is very freeing in the sense those decisions have been made.
Yes.
And you just get to pour yourself into the rendering, or you don't have to think about panel to panel. You do think about it, of course, but not in the same manner. And Rob's like, get out of my way. Like, I know what I want. When I read it, I see it, I'll show you. And it's like, okay, dude, like, and he literally, when we were first talking about this, he said, I don't think North Americans can write that way. And I said, I want to bet. Like, dude, I trust you as an artist. I'll let you go loose. And so we did that free comic day, Conan #0, that came out in 2023. And that was not the first time I'd written plot style, but it was really like a mandate. We were going to do it this way.
Right.
And I sent it to him, and the first pages come back, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that, and this is what I saw. And B, that my name's going to be on this thing, because it is so beautiful and so crazy. And then it's this fascinating sort of ping pong game where now it's coming back at me full speed, like the best damn artwork I've seen in ages. I have to summon the words that are going to do justice to that thing. And it is both the most amazing and intimidating thing, because now you're like, when you read the original Robert E. Howard stories, I talked about the lyricism. Some people will say that Howard's writing is very purple, like it's very descriptive and florid and intense. It's operatic in some ways. Well, what is Rob's artwork but insanely beautiful operatic? Like, I had all the right words now. I could, if I just plugged into Howard, it fit. It was so appropriate for what we were doing. I was no longer afraid of being florid. I was no longer afraid of, like, get that thesaurus out, we're just gonna rip.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel, it feels Wagnerian. You're just looking at it, you're like, this is insane. Like, every page is a thunderclap. And the more I do it, the better I get at it. And the more the artist then is like, we're all trying to lift each other up. What was amazing was doing that first arc of Conan with Rob. And then Doug is simultaneously working, Doug Braithwaite, a legend as well. What an honor to work with him. He's doing our second story arc.
Yes.
Like, and so he's simultaneously, we're sending him Rob's pages for reference. And he's like, excuse my language, oh shit. This guy's pouring it all out. Like, I gotta give
I thought the same.
I gotta give my best. I was like, Doug, your best is crazy. Like, aren't you already giving your best? No, he just like put the pedal to the metal. The next page is coming in their next level. Now I'm sending those over to Rob. Rob's working on the third story arc, and Rob's like, damn it, Braithwaite's really good. I'm like, you're both phenomenal. I get to put my words on this stuff. This is crazy. And just boom, 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 boom. And when we brought in, Fernando Dagnino or Jonas Sharp, now Jesus Merino, these artists are all feeding on the energy and the excitement.
Okay.
I'm at San Diego Comic-Con a few weeks ago, and we announced the great Mark Buckingham is drawing Kull the Conqueror for us. And John Arcudi's writing this miniseries. It's going to be awesome. I'm meeting Mark Buckingham for the first time, and he's like, what an honor it is to be part of this team. And I was just like, what, me? Like, oh, and he said, you guys are defining a new generation and blah, blah, blah. And I still can't.
There's still a bit of imposter syndrome.
I can't fathom that. You know what I mean? Like, I've been doing this now for over 20 years, and it's an amazing, phenomenal honor. I still have pinch me moments every single
I can imagine.
week.
I can imagine, yeah.
And I don't know that will ever go away, and I hope it never does. I joke, we each have our credits, that they come up with. So mine, it says Grim Jim Zub is the credit.
Yeah. I love all of that. And
people come over and they're sort of like, oh, you're Grim Jim. And I know that's the first.
Grim Jim is a very
apparently
good nickname.
Well, I guess. But what's fascinating is like, that now is marking a very specific point in my career that they haven't read my stuff before then. This started with Conan.
Yes.
And we'll have a conversation, and more often than not, they finish and they go, you don't seem grim at all. Well, they call the big guy tiny. Like, that's kind of the joke.
Yeah.
Also, before they fused the sunglasses to his face, Stan wasn't the man. Like, it was sort of like a joke. He was putting on airs, you know what I mean?
And the wig as well. That helped, I think,
Once
didn't it?
it was a comb over before that. Like,
It really was.
The toupee was later. I told my wife, I said, if I ever become Grim Jim, if I ever act like whatever you think that would be, like, slap that out of my face as quickly as humanly possible, because I don't want to be that, you know what I mean? I am still a big kid. I'm still enjoying this ride, and I never want to.
Well, it's, I mean, you talk about because I going back through the first 25 issues again, there's a very clear plan for the first 12 issues, and that's slow burn.
And that was by design. They promised me 12 no matter what.
Oh, right, okay.
And so we were like 0 to 12 is a unit. And if this is my last chance to write Conan, the joke is that I keep thinking it's my last chance. So I wrote Conan in 2015. Gail Simone and I did Conan Red Sonja, the miniseries. Dan Panosian drew it, and Randy Green, like, amazing. It's my only chance to ever write Conan. This will never happen again. And then the character comes back to Marvel. I get to write him in the Avengers for the No Road Home. And then, but those were both co-written, right? Because Gail and then Mark Waid and Al Ewing, who are wonderful, incredible collaborators. It was an ego thing. It's not that I have no ego, I do. I wanted a solo Conan in credit. I wanted, like, given my druthers, here's how I'd write them. And so I pitched, they had Savage Sword at Marvel, but it was like a full color anthology book. And so I pitched The Gambler, which was this 3-part story we did, and Patch Zurcher drew wonderful stuff. And we did this 3-part story, and that was sort of my mic drop, like, Weird Tale style Conan. Conan gets in a gambling hall where he can bet his life away, and he gets tricked into basically having to play this card game that can kill him, because the guy that was supposed to play the game got assassinated, all this crazy stuff. And there's supernatural stuff, and people are manipulating each other. And it's putting Conan in a situation where he can't just pull a sword out and murder somebody. And I had someone say to me, they go, it felt like a Conan story, but it was different from every other Conan story. And I said, no. Structurally, it's The God in the Bowl. So The God in the Bowl is a classic Robert E. Howard tale. And what makes that story fun for me when I read it, a lot of people don't like it because they think it's like a police procedural where they're trying to figure out who the murderer is. So
one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's great. So thank you. I mean, it's awesome. It's not usually on people's like top 5, top 3. So I don't know if it's top 3 for me, but it's up there. So what amazed me about that story is Conan is a thief. He breaks into this the gallery of Publius, whatever his name is. Anyways, this guy who has an art gallery museum, and he's there to steal stuff. And he gets caught by the guards, and there's a dead body there. And Conan finds a dead body at the same time as everybody else. And the guy's like, well, you're a thief and a murderer. And Conan goes, I am not a murderer. I did not kill this guy. And if you call me a murderer, I'm going to fucking kill you. And then they call all the police in and whatever, and they start questioning him. And he's literally got his sword out. Like, if any of you try to arrest me for murder, I'll kill you all. And it's great. It's the civilization versus savagery thing. It's kind of perfect because he's not a liar. And don't call me a liar. I did not kill this guy. And I'll kill you if you call me a liar. So it's this amazing bit of, depth kind of. And Conan's going to go off and he's going to kill a bunch of these guys or they're going to push it too far. It is a bomb. It's going to go off. You just don't know how long the fuse is. And just as you get comfortable reading and they're questioning him and the evidence is mounting one way or the other and it seems to go back and forth. It's like Murder, She Wrote in the Ivorian Age. Like, it's this cool thing. And then something changes and he goes off and there's one of the best 3 paragraphs of bloody death I've ever read in my entire life. I love it. And that's why I like that story. And I wanted to generate a pot, like a pressure cooker like that. This gambling Holly can't just kill people. He's not going to get out of this alive. When's he going to go off? He's going to go off. You don't know how long. And so I structurally built it around a Howard story, but a different one than most people. And so that's kind of the thing for me. It's like, I did that story and I thought, that's the last time I'll ever write Conan.
Right.
And what I didn't know is that Jason Aaron was only going to do a year on the flagship book, and they were already actively looking for a writer. Right as that story came in, it hit, and the guys who owned Conan the Barbarian read that, and they were like, that guy knows what's up. That's a Weird Tale style Conan. That's a creepy, weird, funky. Who's this dude? Like, and I'd written, but they'd approved previous things I'd done, like the No Road Home and the Gale, co-written.
Yeah.
But it didn't jump out at them. And this time it was all me, and they were like, tell us more about this guy. And that became my audition to sort of take over the franchise eventually. Which is the weird
What was Jesus' audition then for this mini-series that started off
an
on
entire
Big
career
Comic Book?
of godlike artwork.
Well, I was talking to your table earlier, you know, for me, it was going all the way back to, Avengers Forever with Carlos Pacheco. And so I knew you first as an inker. And then for me, it was the Superman stuff in the New 52.
Before I went to Forever, nobody knows did because it was in the market, in the Spanish market. But I did 3 mini-series for the Spanish market in black and white.
Right.
Before I went to Forever. So I was working in comics.
I'm just
years
on my
before.
journey from you goes all the way back to the
Yeah.
to the 90s, and I suppose one of the questions I was going to ask you about, not just about how did you get the job, but you know, you're working with a creator who comes from an animation and artistic background, just like you did with George Perez, going back to, you know, the New 52. This is a question for both of you really. How much easier is it when a script comes in from someone who, I'm not saying all comic book writers, because a lot of comic book writers clearly do know what they want on the page.
Right.
I always get the feeling with some from an artistic background, they kind of know the artistic method that little bit more.
Yeah. Well, look, I've been working in comics doing inking, then working in penciling and inking with a script very, very tight.
Yeah.
With, panel 1.
Like we were talking about earlier, of course.
And then came Jim.
Yeah. So this is the first time you're working flat style.
No, it wasn't not the first time, but
Well, the one that stands out the most,
very few
yeah.
scripts. And he said, "How do you perfect the script?
Yeah.
The tight way or the free way?"
Yeah.
So I said, "Whatever you want." I said, "Okay, let's do it."
Yeah, I was
Model
curious.
way.
I wanted to see, you know, one of the things that's been a joy for me is seeing how artists approach the storytelling, the choices they make. And then every so often you might have to nudge a little bit, or you're like, oh, we need a little more room for dialogue here, or I can see how we can layer that in. And that's a real joy for me, because I want you to be able to showcase whatever aspects are most salient, most exciting to you.
Yes,
And that's fun.
it's a proof that for the storytellers. So, but every time I do a page, I say, okay, Jim is going to kill me because this is not what.
Oh no!
everything, but because sometimes your description of the page is even richer than my drawings.
Right.
So I think it's in 2, 3 panels is not enough. I should put more panels because the dialogue can be okay. But anyway, I enjoy so much doing Conan that I want to do it this way. Hal Foster, because all the pages were all the panels were a page. So I said I want to do this in 3 panels. And then Jim never say, no, this is not good.
No, it's because what's great is if the storytelling holds true, then it works, right? That's what's great. I don't want you to draw like Rob. I don't want Doug to draw like you. I don't want I want those artists to be able to draw in a way that is natural and exciting to them, and then I will add or reduce the amount of text where required.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it's both the challenge and the joy. Where I've looked at a page and now it's like a puzzle, like I gotta fit it together. And sometimes I have a very distinct idea of how much dialogue that's gonna require, and other times I'm like, well, I don't need to say anything, that's just all there now. But Conan comics have a unique thing that sometimes people don't know this until I point it out to them. Classic Conan comics, particularly Marvel stuff, but even through the Dark Horse era, generally don't have sound effects.
Oh.
If you look at Conan comics, there is no stab, flash, flash. And Roy said, I don't remember if it was a Comics Journal or some old interview, and I read this, and as soon as he said it, it was like something exploded in my mind, because I'd never noticed it before.
No.
Most people don't. That he realized that if he just did sound effects, it was all just going to be people screaming and stab, death. And it was going to not feel as exciting or poetic like the original Howard stories. But if you add a narrative, and the narrative is describing texture or the thought process or philosophical things happening, it's almost like, I hate to use it because I know it's become a real cliche, like Zack Snyder or like the J.J. Abrams slow the camera down kind of stuff. You slow down while you're looking at those panels because you're reading this textured description of the whatever flexing of the thews or the coppery smell of blood in the air.
Yeah.
And now you're getting textual information you don't get from the art on its own. And B, you're staring more intensely at the artwork while you're reading that description. It's like it slows that action down so the impacts feel like they're hitting harder. You take more time to get through an action scene and it doesn't feel exhausting, it feels exciting. It's like this pulse-pounding intensity that we're doling out to you bit by bit and piece by piece. Every breath, every heartbeat, every crush of bone, every, the sweat and the exhaustion that I'm describing through those moments makes the combat feel more impactful. And when Roy's describing that that's why he did it that way and it felt more like Robert E. Howard, I was like, the light went off and I go, oh, okay. That's what makes a Conan comic feel like a Conan comic and other stuff does not. And so when I went back into it and when I did the flagship series, I like tiptoed my way into that narration and there were parts where I felt like I kind of hit it, but I was still kind of afraid of getting too purple with the prose or getting like, the thesaurus can only do so much work or whatever. And one of the benefits we had of relaunching in 2023 was I knew I was going to be writing Conan a year before we relaunched.
Right.
So I married, because they wanted to have a break from the Marvel run. I finished the Marvel run. We did what's called a bake-off. You guys know the British bake-off. So it's a contest. There were multiple writers that pitched to take over Conan. And I was just one of, I want to say at least 7. I don't know. I only know who 2 of the other writers are.
Right.
And I don't want to out them. One of them was very sweet to me. Last year I found out that they were one of the writers pitching. And he came to me and he said, I love reading Conan every month. I couldn't read it for the first 6 months because I was so mad at you. And now I read it and it's better than anything I would have done. And you're the right man for the job. And you're like, that is the greatest comment any writer will ever give another writer. I would never show my belly. Thank you, sir. That is really sweet. And so I did not think I could possibly get it because I'd done it at Marvel. And because we hit the pandemic and everything was a spiraling mess, it didn't end on a high note. It ended on sort of like a, get her done. And we all get to crawl away and go, well, that was the thing we did. And so I never, ever, ever thought I would write Conan again.
No, of course.
And so getting to do it again and then having tons of time to develop it meant that I was like, no one gets to write the iconic characters. No one gets to do it twice. If you fail, you stupid, stupid man, like you will never, ever live this down. Like you can't blame the pandemic this time. You can't blame, you got your choice of artist, you got your choice of release schedule. They're going to tell the story exactly the way you said. So if it's a failure, that is a 100% me. And so I marinated in the Howard. Like I just like read it and reread it.
It certainly feels that way when I'm reading it. It's you've got that wonderful evocative sort of narration with the alliteration, which I think makes a big difference when we're not using clash bang wallop.
Yeah, and you're trying to find how many ways can you describe people killing each other? You'd be surprised. I surprise myself.
It's a figurative language as well. It's the metaphors.
There's a lot of ways.
You don't seem to get that in modern comics as much because I think a lot of it is the artwork is doing a lot of the work. Yeah. That's why I love Ranveer as a writer because I think he has that same understanding of a deep, rich, dense script. And as you said, sometimes it helps pace the scene. It slows down the action scene. Yeah. If you're watching this action scene out in the right, it's done.
I don't want you to read my comic in 5 minutes. Like I want to lavish time. And then stuff like Jeff Shanks, who's our literary scholar, who writes those essays in the back. That's additive material. You can read it and you can appreciate it even deeper.
Yes.
It's like a letters page or whatever. You may not even read it on your first go through, but it's always waiting there for you. And then you're like, man, I already got hopefully your cover's worth just on the story. And then this gives you this extra bump of historical, context and a little more texture and history and everything else. And you're just like, oh, okay, cool. This is a complete package. You're never going to feel like you're not getting your money's worth.
Yeah, it's certainly, I know the one that really stuck out to me recently. And it's there on the page. I just haven't connected the dots. This whole H.P. Lovecraft cosmic horror, early on in the run so much.
You've drawn a lot of cosmic horror.
Well, I was going to say, because There's also, as you're moving forward with Conan, and you've done all different time zones, so obviously you're following the non-chronological storytelling, all the poetry that creates.
Yeah, it's not a nightmare to organize at all.
The story is...
We got the big board,
Well,
I got
I
the
mean,
strings on it, and I'm pointing at stuff. Okay, but this is going to tie back to that. And everyone's just like, okay.
You've done the big issue 25, which is amazing with Alex Hawley. You've done Conan becoming king.
Yeah.
A few issues
That was
later.
a cocky bit of business.
Well, even if you finish tomorrow, you've hit all the beats.
Yeah, I feel good. And then what was interesting is the cosmic horror beat was one that, Roy would occasionally sort of skim side along it. He used, one of the things that Roy did is he took a lot of other non-Conan, Robert E. Howard stories, and he'd file the serial numbers off. Long story short, that's why we have Red Sonja with a J. That's the Hyborian Red Sonja is not the original Red Sonja. Red Sonja of Rogatino is the original one. She's a pistolier in the Ottoman Wars in this story called Shadow over the Vulture. And he turned her into this take no shit Hyrcanian warrior, and it became a huge hit, and chainmail bikini, and the legend is formed from there. But he'd never really deeply leaned into the Lovecraftness of it. And there's a lot of Lovecraftness. There's a lot of existential dread, especially in Cull, especially in some of the other stories like the Blackstone and other horror stories.
Sadoom himself is straight out at Lovecraft.
Absolutely. The necromancy and the...
I think you did very well putting together.
Yeah, trying to...
Lovecraft
right.
And Robert E. Howard.
And the way I've always described it is both writers have this deep nihilistic sort of thrust through their work that is humanity is by default savage, or humanity is by default insignificant, that we are all hurtling towards destruction, and that, in the grand scheme of the universe, we are meaningless motes upon the cosmic whatever. The difference is a Lovecraft character, once they fully comprehend that, once their mind opens up and they see the vastness of how insignificant they are, they go mad. They go gibbering and they crumple and they can't function anymore. And a Howard character is oh yeah? Well, fuck you, and they fight to their very last breath, and they will fight and fight and fight against the falling of the night. That's the difference. They're both going to lose. Humanity is going to lose. Everything is a tragedy, but Howard says, I'll spit in your eye, and I'll piss and vinegar right to the finish line. And I think that's what makes him the writer he is versus Lovecraft the writer he is, right? And there's no wrong answer. It's just a different conclusion, right? And so it sounds weird to say that Conan is a tragedy, but it's sort of humanity is a tragedy. You know what I mean? And Conan's just showing us the bestial side of ourselves, and the cruelty and the manipulation and whatnot. And so trying to put those into the story, and so they are in some ways heroic, but moments of heroism against cataclysmic evil. That's kind of the weird. And in general, other writers have been more oh, Conan gets the girl, or Conan kicks ass, or Conan's going to kill that guy. And my story has Conan killed that guy. But there's always more guys, and there's always bigger evil. And I'm sort of playing up that dread a little bit more. And for better or for worse, I feel that's more pulp. That's more Howard, if I'm doing it right.
The difference between Lovecraft and Robert Howard is Lovecraft says there are powers, but you don't have any hope. You are condemned. The humanity is failed, and Robert Howard says you can fight.
You can fight.
You can fight, and
you might not win.
And even if you don't win, you're a hero.
Yes.
So the difference is the gods in Robert Howard lesser.
But one of the things I love about Howard's world, about the Hyborian Age, is the deep, mysterious parts of it. The magic is not known. The gods are not. Exactly. I love Dungeons and Dragons, and D&D is a huge part of my fantasy education. I always say the 3 pillars of my fantasy education are Dungeons and Dragons, Conan the Barbarian, and fighting fantasy. those, the wonderful British choose your own adventure
reading
books
those.
that blew my mind. I love
Forest of
that.
Doom.
Yeah, dude. City of Thieves and Death
They
Trap
were great,
Dungeon.
yeah.
I can't get enough.
Did you
of
get
that
into
stuff.
those before Dungeons and Dragons? That seems like a gateway drug to me.
Literally could not tell you, which is probably right around the same time.
Right.
They hit right. Perfect.
Yeah.
I remember I met Ian McKaig at a signing, and Ian, so many people were getting him to sign his Star Wars stuff because he did so much development art for the prequels and all sorts of Star Wars stuff. They were getting all these G-Clay prints and all this stuff signed, and I brought my decimated copy of Death Trap Dungeon. Every single piece of art in that book is somewhere up here.
Yeah.
I can recall it at will. And I brought over this thing that looked like it had been run over by a truck 5 times. And I handed it over to him, and Ian just looks at me and he goes, "We've never met before, but I know you." And that was like the best compliment I ever could have gotten. I was just like, "Yeah, I'm your kind of nerd, buddy. Like, that's me, And that was that weird, nasty brutality of those books. Like, to my 10-year-old mind, this was like, this is the coolest stuff ever. Like, this is so violent and amazing and morally gray. And then you see the Conan the Barbarian movie. I should not have seen it at that age. It's the perfect adventure film. It's morally gray and bankrupt, just like our D&D characters, and get the treasure and get out of there. But it's going to cost you. And the Basil Polidor soundtrack is forever in my mind. And you're like, oh, it's all hitting like the thunderclap of what that fantasy is and what it's meant to be. And it all finds its way into the way that I write fantasy stuff now.
I went to Germany quite a lot as a child, so I saw a lot of these Band-Aid designés everywhere, and I feel sort of, and again, I never grew up in Canada.
I thought you said Band-Aid.
No, I was
just like, go on.
But I remember Run DMC doing that.
Yeah.
But for me, I felt that we had Slain the Barbarian, of course, in sort of 2000 AD at that time. For me, I felt we had more fantasy choices to pick from because of these amazing European artists. I don't know if that was your experience growing up over in Spain and coming across all these amazing artists that maybe didn't get over to North Americas until much later. I mean, everyone knows Mobius, but they might not know other two. And you've mentioned before who went on to influence the European artists of today, who are making it big in America on fantasy titles like Conan.
I had a lot of influences. I'm a sponge. I'm taking everything. I have one of my main influences has been Richard Corbin.
Oh man.
The Bloodstar story that is,
which of course is Howard. So Bloodstar is
about the forgotten gods and the worm.
So good.
Being a monster, but my favorite Conan story is Beyond the Black River.
Oh yeah.
That has nothing to do with the rest.
It's one of the only ones that doesn't have a supernatural slant.
Basically, it's a story taken in the ground.
Yeah.
Without
it's about
any gods,
settlers.
except a tiger,
Men versus men.
saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
All the rest is a very human story.
Yeah.
So,
it feels almost like a Jack London story, like the survivalist tale. Yeah, big
but
time.
what I like more is the adaptation they did, Roy Thomason and John Buscema.
Yeah.
And we're thinking of from Tony DeZuniga.
Yeah.
With all these black captions
Yeah.
and everything, and the black and white, for me it was like, wow, this is the best story of Conan.
Yeah, the storytelling is so rich.
Exactly.
I love the Alcala inked adaptations as well. You like the Tower of the Elephant one they did, Savage Sword, or the People of the Black Circles, another killer. And those Savage Sword stories were like forbidden fruit when we were kids. Like they were, because they didn't have to follow the Comics Code Authority, so it could be more titillating, more violent,
And
more
those
intense.
covers as well.
And then the oversized formats, you can just lavish, get it right in your face. Like this thing's so crazy good. And like I said, it's an artistic showcase. So we brought back Savage Sword on the 50th anniversary of Savage Sword #1. And the fans had told us for years and years and years, got to do black and white, got to do magazine. And when Marvel got the rights back in 2018, they went out to the market and they asked their retailer partners, we're thinking of doing a black and white magazine. And everyone said no. They were like, it won't sell. It needs its own bags and boards, it's shelving, it's weird. you're gonna kill yourself. It's gonna hamstring the potential. So they ended up doing it just as a regular monthly book. And then we just defiantly, we basically, because we wanted it black and white. And so it was an experiment. We were gonna do 6 issues every other month. And that was it. If we could only get 6 out, it would be like an anniversary, 50th anniversary. Okay. And we went to the fan base and we said, this is your only chance. If you don't buy this damn thing, because we're defying retailers, we're defying everyone. No one wants newsprint, but we know you want newsprint. You know, this is what you grew up on, this is what we grew up on. 6 issues, make it or break it. And man, did they come out in droves. And that book has been a winner. We've now renewed it 3 years in a row, and we're on to the 4th year now. We've got artists coming out of the woodwork, classic artists and new artists who want to showcase their black and white skills.
I suppose it gives these people, artists who are busy in other areas, that opportunity to shine, because it's like Judge Dredd in Britain. Everyone wants to draw Judge Dredd.
Well, that's the thing about Conan, exactly that.
Yeah.
There were artists that I don't want to talk out of school, but there were artists we specifically asked, some classic artists, and they said no. The gist of it we got is you can never do it again. It'll never be like it was.
Okay, right.
And then Joe Jusko does the cover to #1, and we got Carrie back, and Horley's doing these career-defining covers for us as well, paintings. And then 25 comes out, and now we kind of got our pick of the litter. Like everyone's like, when can I do a Conan story? I'm so excited to be back into the fold, and that's the feather in our cap that we've been able to capture a little bit of that old lightning. And convince people that...
I think it's more than that, if I'm honest, having read
it feels really good. It feels amazing to know that the legacy's there, that the love is there, that the fans... one of the things in my pitch for the relaunch was that, look, in the 70s, there were three of Marvel's bestsellers were Spider-Man, Star Wars, and Conan. And you look at every subscription ad, Conan's there. All the time. Conan's always right beside Spider-Man, right beside Star Wars in there like tops, all the time. And in the, by the late 80s, that has drifted away. And then that completely loses it in the 90s. And, Dark Horse got some of that thunder back. And then eventually it drifted off. And it's like, those fans aren't dead. Like, some of them are, sure, but the vast majority of them don't feel served by the current market. So we don't want to do a pure nostalgia play. You want to get new readers in the door as well. But there's no reason you can't put an olive branch out and we can't reach some of these people. And one of the things that's been most satisfying for me is getting some of the most calcified fans that were like angrily telling us we were going to fail, told us it could not be good, told us that we were going to, whatever version of this they thought this was going to be, it wasn't going to be like it wasn't going to have the power, it wasn't going to have the things that made it so special to them in their youth. And then we've been able to break through and they go, damn, these are good, I'm there every month. I got retailers who tell me that guys they hadn't seen in the store in 20 years are day and date on every issue. I got guys old enough to be my grandfather coming over, hearty handshakes, telling me I'm doing right by the franchise. Like that stuff's, it's electric. Like it's a really cool feeling. Sometimes weird extreme versions of this. I was at MegaCon in Orlando and this really old gentleman came by and he just looked at Rob's artwork on my banner and stuff. And he just looked at me and said, Conan the Barbarian. And I said, yeah. These are new Conan stories. He goes, no, they aren't. That's John Buscema. These are classics. You don't even know what you're talking about. I was like, no. I know it looks like that, but I swear to God, these are brand. And he picks up the book and he's flipping through it, page after page. And he's staring at it, and he stares at me, and I said, I'm the writer. These are brand new stories. And he just looked at me, and he goes, liar. And he put the book in the stands and he walked away. And everyone on the whole row is laughing their heads off. They're like, Jim, we got to tell him. I was like, no, it's the best compliment. It's the best compliment. I literally couldn't bottle the joy I had in that moment of him telling me I'm a liar. You're like, it's too good. It's too on point. Like that.
I find to make the difference between Rob and John Buscema.
Yeah,
in Pinterest.
Great.
For example, So you see the image and you say, John Buscema.
It's John.
Rob.
John is rocking it. It's some of the best John you've ever seen. Like it's so good. And that's what feels so nice. As I had another time 2 years ago on that Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle, and I got a line of people. It was very sweet, and this gentleman comes forward. And he's just gushing about how when he reads the books, he feels like he's 15 again. Wow. And this means so much to him. And you have no idea how, growing up, he learned like how to read on Conan, and he loves this stuff so much. And the guy behind him in line is getting more and more irritated, and I'm like, oh God, the guy's taking too much time. And so you have to do this weird social aikido where you're like trying to take the energy and redirect it. Like, okay, is there anything that's absurd? It means, do you want to get a photo? Let me sign these books for you? Do you want to buy anything else? And I've got staff at the show, and they're helping them do the purchases. And we're trying to mobilize, but not make someone feel like they're not special.
Yeah.
This might be the only time I ever meet them, and this is really sweet. But the line is long, and this guy's like clearly pissed off. And I was just like, oh God, I don't want to ruin it for the next person either. Finally get this guy in his way, and he leaves. And the next guy walks up, and I said, sir, I'm so sorry. I know that took longer than you were expecting. And he goes, I don't give a shit about that. That guy said everything I was going to say. I thought I was the only one. And like 2 guys back goes, yeah, me too. And they all became friends in line, laughing that they thought they were having this singular experience of their youth being relived through this book.
Yeah.
And instead it was like, there's a dozen of them, and they're all hanging out now. And that felt so amazing and cool and weird. And we're all like laughing about it, because it's like, when it's happening to you, I said the other day, when I was growing up, Spider-Man was my favorite superhero. And you're like, they made $1 billion in a week on the movie.
Yeah,
You're the only guy that likes Spider-Man. But when you're a kid, Peter Parker speaks to you. He speaks to an experience and a fear and a desire that people don't know the power you have inside, and it's hidden away from everyone else, and your struggles are your own. And so it feels like Peter's you and that Spider-Man's your guy.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you show up and he's everybody's guy. And you're like, oh, that's cool too, but he's still mine. You know what I mean? And I feel like those icons do that as well. And so when Conan speaks to these people, or if I'm tapping into that energy, that's a very precious and powerful and strange thing. And there are times when that makes sense to me, and there are times when it still staggers me, having those interactions and being like, me? You're like, well, yeah, in this moment, you got whatever metaphor I want to use, you got your hand on the steering wheel or whatever, and don't crash the Corvette,
yeah.
but it's got to be exciting, it's got to be cool, it's got to be surprising. Like if you just do readaptations of the existing stories, it's going to get calcified. And if you don't take risks, it's going to get calcified.
Yeah.
And so you have this weird thing where you're like, I have all these amazing ingredients, I need to sort of spice it up and do something unexpected, but it's got to be enough Conan that you would never doubt Conan would do that, or that feels like that could work. And how do you do that? I don't know. You keep trying and pushing, and weird little stray thoughts become, stories, or you look at another, Conan story or fantasy story, and you're like, you look at some location and you go, well, if Conan was there, it would break like this. You're like, well, that's the story. We just got to thrust them into those kinds of situations or whatever. And so it becomes easier the more you do, I guess. I don't know how else to put it, I guess.
Yeah, well, can anyone tell me the time? Because I'm aware that my spidey sense is tingling. I don't want to make sure people have got questions asked as well.
It's gone 3.
It's gone 3, so we've got
15 minutes.
good 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So, anyone got any questions then?
Yeah.
For either Jesus or Jim about Conan? There's always excellent.
So I think we chatted a little bit earlier. You were saying
Yeah.
you reckon that now you've got the trust behind you. That
Yeah, we got the wind at our backs. Never take it for granted.
Off
but-
the back of that, is there anything that's slightly out of the norm that you want to do with Conan, like focus on other characters?
Well, we just did an arc that's going to be collected soon called Ghosts and Echoes, and we made a brand new villain. And slight spoilers, but not a big deal. The first issue doesn't have Conan in it. So we did an issue of Conan the Barbarian where he shows up for one panel on the last page. And it's basically the bad guys give our new bad guy a mission. But the entire issue is the origin of this character. And the best compliment we got was people forgot it was supposed to be a Conan comic. They read the whole comic, they were totally invested in this origin story, and this guy's a complete badass, and they can't wait for him to fight Conan. Not this issue, and then it was satisfying they got their money's worth. That felt pretty audacious. I don't know if I could reproduce that. I don't know if I'd want to. But taking those kinds of swings, not that thing again where it's like, that's Conan in the Conan comic, not that, but like taking swings, narrative swings, we did a narrative swing with, when we did Frozen Faith, so we took the germ the amazing Frost Giant's daughter, and built it out to show Atali, the Frost Giant's daughter, Eponon's name, what she was thinking and her motivation for what she did and why she did it, and what happened after. And that's, in retrospect, pretty cocky. Like, retelling the story of how Conan got the crown. Like, Howard had hinted at it, and he says a couple lines about it throughout all the stories. And then Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter did Conan the Liberator. And it's not my favorite novel, ... And we'll just leave it at that. And I was like, I think I really want to tell that story and try and do it as Howardian as I can. I can't say I'm Howard, but like I think we can thrust it in a different way. And I didn't want to take that swing until I knew we had the wind at our backs. And so that's quite a bit of trust where you're like, hey, you think you know the story, but we're going to really tell it to you, that kind of thing. So I have other burning story ideas, but obviously I don't want to spoiler those. But there's other things I want to do. There's other cards I want to lay down. This big mythic arc we're doing. So we started in Conan number 0. The Bound in Blackstone set up a bunch of pieces. And some of them are pieces that have not been revealed yet. Issue 4 is way more important than anyone thinks. There's specific lines that are in that issue that are going to pay dividends in issue 48, 49, and 50. And that's in issue 4. And that is crazy to me. And that was a seed that I threw in there. And I was like, someday maybe you will grow. But if it doesn't happen, it was just for my own personal, I know there was fertilizer there we can work with, but if it doesn't get used, it doesn't get used. And then to be given the mandate, okay, well, what happened was, I remember an hour ago where I said I had 12 issues promised. By issue 3, the sales were crazy. They were like, all right, what's the big picture plan again? And I said, well, we're going to need 3 years. And in issue 36, this is going to happen. And we're going to have 3 events. And event 1 is what eventually became called Battle of the Blackstone. Event 2 is now called Scourge and Serpent. And then event 3 is actually our event 4. And I laid out this monstrous eldritch evil and all this stuff I wanted to do. And the editor was like, it's too much. There's too much. It's great. You need more room to breathe. And they were like, what about 4 years? And I was like, you want to give me 4 years on this book? 4 years, 12 issues is 48. I'm like, well, that feels weird. Can we just do 50? And they were like, sounds great. Let's sign a contract.
But then you have to do 75, sure.
I mean, clearly. Well, you can't do a 2-year. That's 24. That would just be freaking... No, but no matter what happens, I wanted 50 to answer the questions we posited in issues 0 to 4. That we set up a bunch of cool things, and I want all of those to be, if not fully... You never want to shine the light on every shadow, but, but you feel like you got this satisfying mega arc of coolness and mythic heroism or something like that, that you feel like it all worked. And if I do that and I land the plane, then I've done my job. And everything after that's like a victory lap to me. And if it doesn't work, then hopefully people would be like, well, he had ambition. Like and that first 25 were real rocking, and then after that, the wheels kind of came off, but man, he was ambitious. That son of a bitch. So we'll see how that goes.
So no Conan the Clone Saga on the books?
Not as far as I know. Crisis on Infinite Conan.
That could work.
So we can clean up all the continuity and just get back to what really matters. I know you guys are excited for that.
Next question.
I was just thinking, do you ever sort of step back and think, this is not easy, but in an industry dominated by superheroes,
right?
This one Conan has sort of survived for over 50 years.
Oh, it's crazy. Let alone that I'm fucking writing it. Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever, actually. Like, this little nerd from Oshawa, Ontario, an hour east of Toronto, should not have his hand on arguably the world's most famous fantasy character. Yeah. Like, if my grandmother knows who the hobbits are, but she doesn't know the individual hobbits. She knows who the Mother of Dragons is, but she doesn't know specific names. She knows Conan. Like, everybody knows Conan. Some people say, oh yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they know Conan, right? And so to have the ability to guide that franchise, and Fred Malmberg, who owns Conan and runs Heroic Signatures, he's very thoughtful about the franchise. And the way he said it to me, and I couldn't believe he was saying it, he said, look, we can make a movie hopefully once a generation, and on the ultimate, spin of the roulette wheel, you get a franchise out of it, and that's a complete game changer, and nothing will ever be the same if we can get a new movie franchise. But you can't rely on that because Hollywood money and Hollywood systems and people and producers, and these companies are getting crushed and compacted and resold so fast that you can make a deal with someone, and 3 years later when you're supposed to be going into pre-production, those people are gone, and the next group of people doesn't want the feather in their cap from the previous regime, so they'll just smash it and move it on. You can't plan for it. You have to do everything in your power every time as if it's going to happen this time, and then get kicked in the nuts over and over and over again. We can make a video game consistently every 5 years, and they usually do every 5 or 6 years. They make some sort of Conan video game. Conan Exiles is actually lasted now for 7.5 years, which is highly unusual. And they just did an Unreal Engine refresh on it, and it's got bigger numbers than it's had almost since the launch. We could do a novel about once a year. And he goes, but every 30 days, you remind people Conan is awesome. You remind people visually, and you remind people narratively, and I can drop that comic in front of a movie producer, in front of a video game producer, a publisher, foreign, domestic. It is a thunderclap of excitement that reminds people that this is one of the greatest franchises in literary and comic book history. And we can do stuff with that. And he goes, so as far as I'm concerned, when the comic is strong, we're strong. And right now, we're as strong as we've ever been. And that is the ultimate compliment, but you're the sharp tip of the spear. That means you're constantly charging. Like I joke around that every 30 days, like one leaves and another one enters the arena, and I gotta kill this one and send it off to print. But you're not just killing one, because then there's one being written, and there's one being penciled, one being inked, and one being colored, and one being letterproofed. And we're planning for the guy that's gonna come try and kill me in 6 months. And then, so you're like, it's like, okay, yeah, the next guy's got to go. And so it's this endless battle every 30 days. And because we do the event miniseries, I'm double shipping now. So I'm doing 2 a month to get the miniseries out for the fall. And then we have to tuck up the schedule by 2 weeks because Christmas and New Year's, the Heroic Signatures team doesn't work. So I got to get books done in about 3 weeks in the fall when I would normally have 4. And so it's just like, we're in just the killing field right now. Like everything's got to go, and it's great. It's an amazing, every day there's stuff in my inbox. There's reference material, and there's new pencil pages. There's inks from brilliant artists like Jesus, or colors coming in from Zhao or from Diego. There's covers, and there's variant covers, and there's promotional material and interviews, and you're just like, it's this unbearable fire hose of excitement all the time, and you're just like holding on. You're like, man, we've been doing this for 34 issues, and a new free comic book day every year. You're like, yeah! And the few moments you finally get ahead enough on the treadmill and you step off, and then you're like dry heaving at the side of the road, and you're like, I love comics! And then you're like, let's get back in there! And you're just like, so like I'm doing this trip, and one of the reasons they convinced me to come over here is because on the way back, we're stopping in Dublin, and I convinced my wife we're going to do 4 days in Dublin, and I'm just going to have a Guinness, and I'm going to stare at a green field and just do nothing.
Take about 4 days for Guinness to be poured.
Yeah, I'm just going to stare and breathe and just be like, all right, we're heading into one of the busiest periods. And
Right.
I'm just going to like get
a little moment of peace and tranquility before the berserking.
That's right.
happens.
But, and if Conan is truly an Irish name or whatever it seems appropriate, I will just sit there and stare and just be like, all right, buddy, I still got it in me. Like, let's keep going.
Yeah, man.
It's good.
That's all right, let's keep on going. I would dare say we've got enough time for one more question. What's the time, please? I know my next panel's at 1:30.
Nearly quarter past.
Nearly 1:15. So let's have one more question then.
Given everything you just said as well about your D&D heritage and your Final Fantasy stuff, Conan the Final Fantasy?
So they did a series of, I'm sure everyone that worked on them are wonderful and they love their mothers. So
this doesn't sound like it's going
off, and they did these endless quest books with Conan. They're not great. I would love to do some sort of a choose your own adventure style. It's like, a branching narrative thing would be really, really fun. The problem is that I'm doing the monthly comics and the events and everything else. I've been, this has come out in other interviews, I've been asked if I would do a novel, and I literally had to say no, because I'm too busy. I'm now doing consulting on other media, and I'm NDA up, so take of that whatever you will. really exciting stuff going on. And so, so that's like my fill. And then with the tiny sliver of what I got in there, my wife and I are doing the Young Adventurers Guides for Dungeons and Dragons, which is bringing new people into the fold. So this is like one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. And I've got a new creator-owned comic because I swore to myself that I would not stop making stuff that I own and control. And this will shock no one. It's a sword and sorcery book that's going to launch next year. So that I'm full now, very, 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 very full. And so stuff like a branching narrative book or a novel or like, you know, people are like, I don't know why they don't, fill in the blank. I don't know why you don't, because of that, right? Not because I don't want to, not because I don't think that'd be cool, but that's like, I don't know, the fourth phase of my retirement plan is like, all right, time for the pulp writer, novel writer guy, like whatever that's gonna be, whenever that might happen. Not from a lack of will, but from a lack of humanity left in my corpse.
Well, I would like to thank Jim and Jesus for their time. I dare say if you've got burning questions, they are at their
And
table.
you guys gotta come over and see Jesus' originals.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
nothing replaces, if you've never seen original full-size artwork, beautiful, beautiful line work, the confidence
Thank you
and
very
the
much.
skill is unbelievably inspiring to see it in person and to know how that stuff is made, let alone get him to do a sketch and just watch it come out of him. It's the most insane, beautiful work.
Same thing as,
It's a legend.
as when you are doing sketches and everything that I was.
Oh, thank you. It's
Blown
kind.
away.
I'm a very lazy artist who's now cheated my way into writing, so I'm very, very proud.
Doesn't sound like you're being lazy in the writing department.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Jim.
Thank
Enjoy
you,
the
guys.
rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your time.